Hi, it's Maya here, and this is my November wrap-up. In November I read 8 things, and I gave them all 3 or 4 stars, so it was a pretty good reading month. I didn't read a bad book in November. And there was one book that I won't be going through here because I already went through it in my October wrap-up, even though I did finish it in November, and that is Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, which I went through with my other Victober read, so since it had to do with that theme, I went through it the same time as the others. But let's go through the books that I read in November. I will go through them from the one that I like the least to the one that I like the most, even though, like I said, I didn't read a bad book this month. The first book that I'll be talking about here is The Guest Cat or Neko no Kyaku by Takeshi Hiraide. I read this in Finnish, so it was called Kissa Vieras. This is a book that I saw in the bestseller shelf in my library, and I picked it up almost at random. I had only heard about it from Katie Loves to Read before, so since it was sitting there at the bestseller shelf, which is this shelf in my library that has popular books that you can borrow for 2 weeks and you can't renew them, and it was quite short, I decided to try it out. And it was definitely very Japanese. I would say that it is part of the Mono no Awara tradition, which is this thing that is quite hard to explain, at least not in my native language. I'm going to read the definition from Wikipedia. So Mono no Awara is this Japanese term for the awareness of impermanence or transience of things, and both a transient gentle sadness or wistfulness at their passing, as well as a longer, deeper, gentle sadness about this state being the reality of life. So it focuses on moments and momentary things, but also the knowledge that all these moments must pass. And empathy towards the inevitable passing of all things. So this is quite a simple story about a couple living in a rental apartment, and their neighbors get a kitten that also visits their house on occasion and the garden surrounding their house, because they are renting this smaller apartment in the grounds of this big apartment with a big garden. And it's just moments of time of this cat visiting them and their everyday life. I enjoyed it just fine. I gave it 3 stars. Next I finished an audiobook called Is It Just Me by Miranda Hart. Miranda Hart is an English actor and comedian, and I have seen some of the episodes of her sitcom Miranda, and she was also in the movie Spy with Melissa McCarthy. I picked this audiobook up because I wanted to listen to something where the author is also the narrator and where someone tells about their everyday experiences or about their life. And in Is It Just Me, Miranda Hart goes through these everyday things. There are these chapters for weddings, for exercise, for food, for career, for dating. It goes through how she reacts to certain things, how she feels about certain things, and is it just her who feels this way about these things. It wasn't as funny as I was expecting. It was funny at parts, but I think it had to do with the fact that my reactions and how I feel about things is very different to hers. So there was this sort of disconnect with our personalities. Some of this is also told by Miranda telling this story to her youngest self. And that was on occasion funny, but also at times hard for the ears, because sometimes she does this very high voice for herself as a teenager, and I might have the volume up too loud for that. I'm always listening with my headphones. So this was entertaining enough to listen to when I was out, like walking or on the bus. I gave it 3 stars as well. The next book I'm going to talk about is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. I read this as a buddy read together with Sarah from the book Witches Cauldron. And I wanted to read this book because I saw the movie adaptation, The Handmaiden by Park Chan-wook, which is set in Korea. And I really enjoyed that movie, so I wanted to try the book out. I haven't read anything from Sarah Waters before. This book is about a con in Victorian England with a lesbian protagonist. So the protagonist is a thief who gets onto this con with this con man, and she gets hired to be the maid for this rich young woman who the con artist is planning to marry and get her money, and then they will split the money between them. And it has a lot of plot twists all over the place. But I actually like the movie better than I like the book. The movie had some issues, but I still liked it more. I don't know if I would feel the same if I had read the book first, but now I did. So the book and the movie are pretty much the same until a certain part, and then they begin to moving completely different directions. So what I didn't like about this book was that it was very depressing. A lot of really rough stuff happens to the protagonist, and it started to feel like only this collection of one horrible thing after another, and horribleness for horribleness' sake. And I sort of began to dread reading it at one point because there was no end in sight for this. But I did finish it, and in the end I did quite like it. I gave it 3.5 stars, but I still can't say that I loved it or particularly enjoyed it. But the plot twists were many and quite surprising. And I also liked the main character. I also read a comic trade called Harrow County Vol.1 Countless Haints, and this is a horror comic that I picked up at random from the library. I just saw it there on the shelf and quite liked the art style. It had this watercolor art, and I just decided to try it out, and I'm glad I did. It was a random pick, but it turned out to be really good. I also remembered hearing the title somewhere before. It might have been on Amanda's channel, but I'm not completely sure. This is a Southern Gothic horror comic about a girl who turns 18 and finds out that she is the reincarnation of a witch who her parents and her parents' friends killed before she was born. And there are ghosts and monsters in the nearby woods, and it has some pretty grotesque stuff in it. Like it has this being, a young boy, running around with no skin, so you can see his muscles. And then there's also his skin flopping about in a different place, just sort of lying there and also talking. So pretty creepy stuff, but nothing I couldn't handle. And I gave it 4 stars. I will definitely check out more of it if I happen to find it. Then I read Monstress Vol.1 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. This is a fancy comic set in this intriguing rich world with many different factions and a complex history, and the art is also stunning. The art is very intricate and sort of Art Deco inspired, and the colors are these great tones of brown and grey, and it had a ton of cool, dark and twisted female characters. I really had to pay attention when I was reading it because it had a huge amount of words per page, and the artwork was so intricate, the world was so full, the history was so complex that I really had to focus that I got everything. There were some twisty character relationships and unexplained mysteries, and it was really fascinating. So 4 stars for that. I have to say though that this is something that Sarah, again from the book Witches Cauldron, brought to my attention, which was that the fat characters were super evil. So the representation of fat characters isn't really good in this. Especially there was this one really, really twisted prison guard. So that's something you might want to know. Then I read an art book, which was The Singing Bones by Sean Tan. This is an art book with, on one page, a sculpture that Sean Tan has made based on a specific fairy tale, and on the other page, a brief snippet from the fairy tale, sort of bringing mood to the sculpture. And the sculptures were stunning. One thing I hoped that I would have noticed before was that at the back there were notes with little synopses of each of the fairy tale. So that would have saved me a lot of time, because sometimes when I saw the sculpture and the little snippet and it was about a fairy tale I hadn't heard about before, I googled it and tried to find a place to sort of get an idea of what the whole fairy tale would be like, when I could have just turned to the notes. So if you're gonna pick this one up, know about the notes. There are brief summaries of all the fairy tales. The sculptures were these mostly grey and red, sort of hefty characters. It was something that Neil Gaiman said in the foreword of the introduction, that they look like something that he wants to pick up and sort of feel the weight and feel the surface in his hands. And after I read that, I couldn't help but picture it myself when I looked at them. Some of my favorites were Snow White, All Fur, Nix in the Pond, Faithful Johannes, the Boots of Buffalo Leather, the witch in the Hansel and Gretel sculpture that was so creepy, and also the Frog King, which is the very first one. But honestly, they were all gorgeous or creepy or both. 4 stars, or 4.5 even. And my favorite thing that I read in the month of November was The Witches of Lychford by Paul Cornell. This is a tour.com novella, so it's quite short work. It is about this little village and about 3 women in that village and about a supermarket that is planned to be built there. And I really like the writing style. I got into it the moment I started reading it. It started with one of the characters who is this grouchy old woman, sort of the one old woman that everyone in this little village knows and sort of steers clear of because she's often in a bad mood. And I loved her instantly. And all the characters were really great. There's also a priest who used to live there when she was younger and has now returned back to be the priest of the village. And then an atheist young woman who was the friend of the priest and is now running a magic shop. The characters were so great and their relationships, their interactions were lovely. There's this plot of there being evil forces at play along with the supermarket being there and about perhaps the borders of the magical world and our world being breached. And it was really interesting. And I'm really looking forward to reading more of these novellas. There is at least one more and I think there's more coming. The second novella is called The Lost Child of Lychford, I think, and I will be picking that up quite soon. So 4 stars for this one. So those were all the books that I read in November. I hope you had a great reading month in November. Had you heard of Harrow County before? Because I don't think I had before seeing it in the library. Like I said, I had that vague impression, but I'm not sure. So let me know if it's something that's quite popular or well known and I just hadn't heard about it. And also, what was your favorite books that you read in November? I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you later in my next one. Bye!